the author. Hello, my name is Luke Green. I am the author of the Divine Blood setting, which you already know if you've seen the other videos that are on this channel, since this is not really my main channel, it's just the one that Google Plus sends to. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show a little bit of the draft for the Demon Next Door campaign book. It is not gone through layout yet. In fact, it hasn't gone through all the editing yet. I'm still waiting for decisions and suggestions from backers before I start finishing it. But it's got most of it done. So let's go here. This is an open office. This is the forward on my discussion about Demon Next Door, the Divine Blood, and what this book is. There's a list of influences, which it was suggested to me that I include Frozen because Elsa would make a good example of an Akira in the setting. The first thing that's going to be hit is we're going to talk about the community, the origins of the community, the history of it, where it came from, going back to before quite a bit before the purges, a couple thousand years ago, up to more modern times with the Beijing Conference of 1815 and the setting times, which is the 21st century. The next section is the community in the world, which is a general discussion about how the community fits in, what its kind of modern day practices are to avoid getting attention. And then we also have a reference to the community species and how the different species that were in the main book relate to the community. This includes the ones that aren't really part of the community, such as demons and gargoyles and a couple of others that are and gods and such that are generally outside the community. Then we have community-friendly regions, which you can see that we need to do a little bit here because that should be as large as that. Then that covers the friendly regions, the unfriendly regions, the generational attitudes of people that are over 200 years old, the attitudes of the generation that decided they wanted to stop being so suspicious, wanted to start getting back into the public eye, the group that's transitioning, the group, and then the last two generations, the comfortable generation and the careless generation, which in the last 50 years have become progressively more complacent. And then you have the signs and portents, which is actually rather silly. A silly thing. I was going to call it signs and portents. It's a section dealing with the little signs they put up on the walls or such to show that something's going on. So alchemical symbols can refer to the place of business for a magician. The all-seeing eye is a joke about New Agers. It's a prank. Border runes just show where the end of a community neighborhood is. Brayholm trees, the butterfly, the dream catcher. These are some common ones. Any GM is perfectly capable of adding their own if they want. There are going to be dozens of such signs that anybody growing up in the community would recognize, but which you don't necessarily need all of them. Then I get a little bit into the immortals, the gods and the demons, with Nirvana and Yomi civilians. And we talk about the general, and then we go into Nirvana, and then we go into Yomi, and then we start talking about ascendants, who are people that were born human but became gods or demons, defectors, exiles, and abductions. We'll get more into this when we actually do the Immortals book, but I wanted to at least broach the information here because it's important to, if you're doing civilian immortals, it's important to know at least a little bit of what's going on. We'll get more into detail later. Demonic demigods and godly half-demons, heralds and Faustians, pop culture. I wanted, even though this is not the God Demon specific campaign book, I wanted this to be the civilian specific campaign book. And the gods and demons have just as many civilians as the other races do, or the community. Then there's pop culture, which is getting into, this is probably going to be mostly centric to the developed world, but stuff like body modifications, including genetic modifications, which includes modifying the colors of like hair, eyes, or skin, exotic modifications like doing the silly sort of things with getting fake horns as a cosmetic genetic modification, ethnicity mods, piercings, tattoos, which are some of the more traditional things, entertainment, a little bit about books. This is one of the sections where I want some input from my backers on. Right now I got a little bit about books, but I don't have any actual list of popular titles. I know Dresden Files does show up in the universe because in one of the short stories, Damir gives a Dresden Files novel to Asia as a gift. Comics are there, and again, I don't have specifics on comics. Movies, the only information I have on movies right now is John Bye, which is the Divine Blood variation of James Bond, where Ian Fleming, after World War II, was living in the CRCMP, which is the combination of North China and Mongolia, and more recently in the 21st century, a little bit of Russia in the form of Kamchatka after the Soviet Union collapsed. Kamchatka decided to join the CRCMP, so now would be the Cultural Republic. It's right now the Cultural Republic of Chinese and Mongolian peoples. Be more accurate now to say the Cultural Republic of Chinese, Mongolian, and Russian peoples. Anyway, imagine if the James Bond franchise started with where the first actor for James Bond was Bruce Lee, and that's John Bye. Then you get into television, which has Precious Puppies, which is the My Little Pony XP. Sykes programming, which is a reference to the kind of TV shows that the organization Psych puts on. And again, we'll probably get a little bit more into that when we do Sykes' book. Beautiful People, and that's real, and the thing in the real life with the photoshopped looks, where a lot of actors and actresses are photoshopped to look ridiculous. That's what the Beautiful People trend is. I have a spot here for video games, but I have not come up with any yet. I'm wanting to see if I got any ideas from the backers before I add my own. I know the three main classic hubs for video games in this world are America, Japan, and Italy. So we'll probably have the Pac-Man, the Mario Brothers, and stuff like that, but I'm going to consider what to put on what Italy's ads are. The next part is basic elements, and you can see there really needs to be some formatting done. Though I will admit I wrote this in Word, and that would be on my laptop, and this particular computer does not have Word, so I'm opening it in OpenOffice. The basic elements that you want to focus on drama but not danger, that it's focused on Schadenfreude and daily fantasy, sitcom type amusement. You're dealing with supernatural stuff but not superheroes. These people might have powers, but they're not generally going to be good in a real crisis. They're going to panic most of the time. So you're mostly keeping this to lighthearted dramas and stuff. Then we get into campaign creation. You have suggested campaign types like Akira's in the Wild, where the characters are mostly people that are developing powers, but they don't know anybody in the community, and they're just developing out on their own. Gamers United, which would be a bunch of supernaturals that also do role-playing games together or some other kind of games. Government Sponsored, which is where you're psychics that exist in a government facility of some kind, but not a military one, just a research one, and probably treated more or less fine, depending on how serious and dark you wanted your campaign to be. But it's mostly, since this is Demon Next Door, it's mostly going to be lighthearted and fine, and not some of the nasty stuff like you would get in the darker places of the world. Office work would campaign would focus around supernaturals that have regular lives, and a bunch of supernaturals or people that know they're supernatural that go to work at the same day job, like the same office, the same McDonald's, the same restaurant, whatever. Then you have school shenanigans, which is what the included scenario is the school shenanigans storyline. Welcome to the Community is going to be a neighborhood thing where you're focused around a neighborhood and people that live in the same area. And then you get into themes where you have the absurdly normal, and that's basically that you have these awesome abilities, but everybody is just going about their normal life, and it's like they're not really doing anything with the supernatural stuff. This works best if you have mostly normal people that are discovering the supernatural and discovering that it's not really all that unusual, or that those lives aren't unusual. And then the fun is the overreactions from the people just learning about this, like, aren't you supposed to be like angsty or doing superhero stuff? Discovery would be about learning about your own powers or stuff like that. Growing up is the standard growing up thing. Relationships would be if you're interested in doing the romantic trials or romantic triangles or any other sorts of relationship, like mother and daughter, father, son, mother, son, parents and children, brothers and sisters, girlfriend, boyfriend, boyfriend, monogamous, polyamorous, whatever, any sort of relationship situation, whether it's romantic or friendly, that's what that campaign would deal with. Secrecy would be focusing on trying to avoid having the real world discover you, which means you're going to be having situations where somebody's going to be stumbling upon you at any given time. This is like those cartoons when we were 80s. The Littles, if you remember the Littles, and the scientists that kept wanting to capture the Littles, that's kind of the same thing. Or Alex Mack, where she has the powers and in the company's trying to find her and experiment on her. Slice of life is basically, that as a theme is just basically everything else all mixed together. It's the general, I want to do slice of life, which means they're going to be changing what they're focusing on from moment to moment. That would be like Saved by the Bell, Azumanga Daioh, anything like that. And then you get into moods, and I only have 3 moods, so this shouldn't take too long to get through. I have comedy, drama, and then soap opera. And soap opera is basically like drama built up to the point that where it's absurd and comedic, but it takes itself so seriously. Your characters will be playing everything so seriously, but in reality, as players, as characters, everything's being taken seriously. As players, it's a joke. So it's a little bit, it's absurdist comedy rather than slapstick comedy. Hybrid campaigns are where you have characters that are maybe the more standard type characters that are tough, people of action and all that, but you're focusing on their life between the missions. Maybe every once in a while you'll show an actual mission, but you're focusing on the life between the mission. This is like those comic books you see recently with Spider-Man and Iron Man just hanging out and talking about how Spider-Man can stick to everything, including the Hulk. But there are some sample hybrid campaigns, and these aren't heavily discussed. There's the After Op, in which case the characters are special forces or psychic freelancers or whatever, and you're just dealing with how they hang out between the operations. And there's All in the Family, which is you're dealing with the sorcerer families, which I have not mentioned too much in this book. I have discussed them a little bit, but I have not gotten into them too much because they're going to get their own book, and the sorcerer families are not civilian, really. Battlefield Living would be like the show MASH, or the McHale's Navy, where you have the situation where there is a war of some kind going on, but you're focusing on these antics that are taking place mostly behind lines. Survival and Tyranny would be focusing on people living in Brazil, Burma, Russia, and some places in the British Empire, and trying to live a normal life while there's this oppressive regime there. And then the undercover stories, in which is one of the play tests, where the characters are going to a school where they're pretending to be students. Like in our case, in the play test, we had 3 characters who, for different reasons, looked like they were teenagers. One was hiding out from the mob. One was subject of an emergency genetic treatment that made her look younger. And the third had eaten a dryad fruit and was lucky enough to come out an Oread rather than a dryad, and was stuck at age 16 for, well, until she dies, and had actually been around for 38 some years and hadn't figured out why she stopped aging. There was those 3, and then there was a teacher, a character who was playing a young teacher. So 4 characters in total, and that's what you're doing. That was what that campaign was those 4 characters acting as security at a high-profile school. Then we had some gameplay advice. You want to concede defeat often. I'm probably going to have to reword that. You probably aren't going to get to where you need to concede defeat too much, but you will want to concede defeat more than have people taken out. When you do have people taken out, you're going to want them being taken out in ways that are not generally permanent. This is going to be a light-hearted campaign book, more or less. Player-character conflict. That was one of the biggest sources of fun in our play tests, was the characters, as long as there weren't serious adversaries. As soon as people with guns showed up, they gelled together and took on the bad guys. But outside, when there weren't specific antagonists, the players had the most fun teasing each other. And that works out really well for this kind of thing, because if you look at the sitcoms and such, that's pretty much what happens. Is a lot of the sitcom fun is with the characters interacting with each other and giving each other a hard time. Self-inflicted social tax is another thing that we came across in playtest, which, if you've seen my run through of the scenario that's also on this channel, you would have encountered that. Let's see. Character creation guidelines, and this stuff in red is places where I need to add more. New species templates. I'm going to add up to 2 species, and I'm going to take suggestions from backers. That's one of the things I'm waiting for. New skill templates. That's stuff like a student, teacher, secretary, that kind of thing. And we got a couple new advantages and a couple new heroic, one here, new expert advantages and a new heroic advantage. I'm probably going to add more to that. And then we have the scenario, which you can see me running through it on this channel. It's about a 3.5 hour playthrough. You also have some information about how to do this. There's suggestions on turn order and splitting the party, which I could almost put in the gameplay situation as well. Basically, you have people in 2 or 3 different places, but you have them all roll initiative as if they're all in the same place, and you run all the different incidents as one big combat or one big event. And I have an example situation. I don't know if I'm going to include that. It does take up a lot of space. And then we get into the scenario itself, which is the day at the fundraising fair. You have trying to build a booth, which is the main plot. I call it subplot 1. It is the main plot. Well, which of the subplots is the main plot depends on which your characters prefer. If you want to deal with the really wacky silliness, you would focus on the booth. If you want to focus on discovering the supernatural, you'd focus on Jess Kara's awakening and realizing she's not human. If you want to focus on keeping the supernatural secret, you'd focus on the antagonist reporter. And then you get to the characters. There are 24 characters, which this means is that the sample characters in this are generally all going. Most of them are going to be teenagers with 6 adults. So not so much example characters for the workplace, but it still comes to a lot of, you get a little bit of that with the teachers and the reporters, but still comes to a lot of example characters. And most of these characters, most of them do not have supernatural powers, since the starting scenario is meant to be a very, very introductory scenario for both the characters and the players. If you want characters that are more generally supernatural, or you want to play different characters, you can run the same scenario. Just take Jess as your piece is your NPC, and one of the reporters is an antagonist. Let your players make their own characters, and you're good. And these are your pool of supporting characters. That's pretty much what it was for. The scenario was meant to be used in a convention, and it was just meant to be done real fast. And I created 24 pre-generated characters just so they would have a lot of variety between the times they ran it. They ended up running it twice on 2 tables simultaneously, so they had 2 games of it with each of them with 6 different characters, and the reports came out very interesting. Okay, so that is what is written so far. Right now it's at 117 pages. My experience with the core book was that will be a lot smaller when you actually do the print. Just a moment. Stop the screen share. Okay, and there I'm back again. Give me a moment. And I'm going to go ahead and pull up what the core book looks like real quick, so that I can show you what I kind of want it to end up looking a little bit like. I'll end up using the same layout person, getting in contact with him in a little bit. And let's see, do that up. I'm still bringing it up. Yes, screen share. I'm sorry, I do not like Google Plus too much. Okay, so this was the layout for the main book, what it looked like. This is the PDF, the downloadable PDF. It's the same sort of thing, the list of influences, comics, manga. This was my test copy. I think actually, I'm not sure if I had this fixed or not. I don't know if I cared too much about it. I probably shouldn't say that. There are other parts where I definitely cared that something fit. But for the forward in this early section, I wasn't all that concerned. And you can see all the different influences. There's probably more than just that. There are over 70 pieces of art in this. I'm only looking for an additional 20 or so, 40 really, because I'm getting portraits for each of the pre-generated characters as well. And these are kind of zoomed in a lot closer than you would normally. This is at almost 200% zoom, so we're getting a little pixelation at this zoom level. Yeah. So yeah, there's around 72%. I would like another one of these population things to show the population of civilian supernaturals versus ones in crisis. And then there's some basic info. This is the core book. I'm going to skim through it real quick here, because I don't have time to go through the entire 300 some pages. But this is kind of what I generally wanted to look like, the same sort of general appearance. And I'm going to use the same layout guy. And this is primarily what I'm looking for. I unfortunately am not able to secure the same comic artist, so I don't know if I will have a comic for the second book or not, but I want to do a lot of these like set pieces and scenes and such. It will probably be of a more lighthearted style, one of the more lighthearted styles rather than one of the more serious styles. I'll save the more serious styles for one of the other books. I'll keep this to more lighthearted styles. These pieces of art do get rather expensive. The portraits aren't going to be costing me much. The portraits are costing me about $9 per person, and they're coming out just fine. But they're good. They're basic, really beautiful, really nice looking portraits. The kind of scenes I want to add for succubus. The kind of scenes I want to add for extra mood pieces, flavor pieces, are going to be more expensive. In general, when you're going to get to stuff on that level, you're looking at $45 a piece, and that's more simple scene. So probably looking $60, $70 a piece for the scenes. And you notice most of my art here is portraits. I want to make the art for this coming book more thematic, showing events happening rather than showing people. Let's see if I can show you an example of what I mean. It's the racial stuff. Okay, so that's the cover artist that I did that. And that's the piece of art showing different villains. And this is the kind of scene I want more of. That's actually something's happening. It's not just a picture of a person. Or this. Then this is exactly the kind of scene I want. Where something's happening and it's rather goofy, school-related nonsense. I'll want some sort of goofy office-related nonsense or other such things. One of the backer suggestions is you get to suggest a piece of art for me. This is another thing. This is actually a scene taken straight from one of the novels, where Hella's asking for something rather ridiculous from Leela too. Yeah. So this is what I'm trying to get the second book to match up to. Here's another one of the kind of scenes, and I would want them to be color for this book. These were black and white for the novel, and I reused them for the core book. I ended up, like I said, I had 70 pieces of art. I think about 50 of those were specifically done for the core rule book, and the others had been used, and maybe 20 or so had been used in the novel or in different short stories. And I ended up using a couple pieces of art from outside the setting entirely that could be used to fit the setting. And I just want more of these scene arts. And let me go ahead. And that's where I stand. I am currently at about $405 out of $3,000. I have about 20 days left to raise it in. Anything you can do to help would be great. Let me go ahead and look up the... Let me show you where the scene is, the thing is. This is it. It's Demon Blood. It's Divine Blood, Demon Next Door by Thriftland. It is on the Kickstarter. I might... Next time I do this, I might choose to go with one of the other crowdfunding things that lets you have partial goals. Because in this case, if I do not match the 3,000, I don't get anything. At the current moment, if I were getting partial, the 400 would fund the layout and the pictures and the portraits, but it wouldn't fund pretty much anything else. What I'm asking for is down here. Okay, 24 portrait formatting and editing of the book. That's the layout and the editing. 24 character portraits of the pre-generated characters included with the scenario. 20 pieces of art within the book itself. Cover art, printing and shipping of the physical rewards. And if the basic and stretch goals are accounted for, what's left will go towards recouping my advertising costs, which means I'm going to pay for advertising to sell it. The rewards are priced with shipping accounted for. And I have a couple stretch goals, which include 10 more pieces of art to be featured in the book, newspaper and or Yonkoma style comic strips added to the book, sample maps, and that's 500, so I want about 10 newspaper type strips or Yonkoma style strips, which are the 4-panel Japanese strips, or 4,500. Am I doing screen share? I am not. Okay. Where are you? There you are. These are my stretch goals. And this is where it is. Divine Blood, Demon Next Door on Kickstarter. I have 405 out of 3,000. I have 20 days to go. I have 25 backers. I have a lot of different rewards. See, you can look through that. The average Joe, just get an electronic copy. Planning ahead, you get to vote on which book I work on next. Guest star is you get to suggest a character concept for the next expansion. Pop cultures, you get to suggest an idea for movies, books, video games before I finish that section. The How It All Began comes with the electronic copy of the novel. The Peek at Other Words comes with a electronic copy of the Bystander novel, which is one of my other settings. Open the Door gives you an electronic copy of the RPG along with the copy of this campaign book, and the artist lets you suggest what a good subject matter for one of the 10 pieces of art would be on this thing. And the How It All Began and what else happened along the way would be an electronic copy of the novel and the short stories that exist. Then Open the Door and Step In is a free electronic copy of the RPG book and the novel. See Your Archivist is a free copy of the book when it is finished. That's the physical copy. The Pledge, the dog person, is you get to name a precious puppy. I have one person already going after that. I kind of suspect a My Little Pony fan. 2 backers have gone for getting the electronic copy with the RPG, the novel, and all the short stories as electronic copies as well. The File Clerk gives you a physical copy of the RPG, and it's going to be the black and white softbound copy. Give me a moment, and I can show you that. Go back to my screen share. This is the black and white copy of the book. You already saw what the color copy looks like through the PDF. But the black and white copy is pretty much the same thing. Anyway, that is pretty much everything. Please go ahead and help out where you can. Again, I'm at 400 out of 3,000. I'm a little bit over 10% funded. That at the current moment, I just need a couple up to a couple thousand more. Now, what happens if I'm not funded is the production of this book is both slowed down and it comes out of my pocket, and that's why it's slowed down. Which means I will likely end up not putting as much art in it. It'll come out looking with a lot of 5 to 7 recycled pictures from the core book and the portraits for the pre-generated characters and the layout. But other than that, it'll look good. It won't look as good as I want it to be, and that's where I need the help. Because if I do this out of pocket, I can do it either bare bones with some minimal polish and take a little bit of time, or I can take a long time and make it look as pretty as that book in comparison. The hardbound book. This is the hardbound, and I just dropped all my other books. And see, it's the same as stuff as I showed you on the PDF. So I can either do it slow and beautiful, or I can do it quick and utilitarian, but I can't do it utilitarian and beautiful without help from other people. And that's where this comes in. I need the help from other people to make this happen. The amount I'm asking for is meant to include the cost of any of the rewards you ask for. But most of it is going towards the art or the layout or the advertising. It'll all go towards the book in some regards. Thank you for your support.